Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome back to the On podcast. We've been joined again, graciously so, by brother Robbin Yassin. If you're not aware of him, I would recommend that you watch our previous podcast with him. Uh, Robin's been in and out of Syria now, and he's been there a couple of weeks ago. In fact, at the high time of the Sueda crisis. Robin, sir, how you been? How you doing? Thank you for coming on to the show.
Alhamdulillah, thank you for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. With all the cynicism that's going around, your there's a lot of positive, like your criticisms and your critique of the new Syrian state is always it's coming from a good place, and it's always a positive sort of wanting to big up them and bring them into the forefront of the conversation. In Pakistan, even before we started the recording, I was mentioning that there's a purposeful neglect in the media for Palestine and the Sham in general. But for Syria, it's like a complete, like, they're like, huh, Syria, what? Who? And that's the worst of it. The best of it will be, yeah, the new regime is all Al Qaeda, or they're all ISIS, or oh, actually it's the Mossad, or actually it's the CIA. So, what is actually going on in Syria? Who are the stakeholders? And what did we see in Sueda recently and Latakia previously? What are these cultural and sectarian clashes that we're having? And what does this represent on a wider scale?
If I can do a tiny bit of background without getting lost in it, um, some people, I noticed this about the disinformation or at least lack of information which exists about Syria specifically in Pakistan and many other places. There's a lot of propaganda and a lot of ignorance. I mean, a friend of mine who is high up in the Pakistani legal profession, and he's a very well-educated man who keeps abreast of affairs and so on. When I told him about Iran's crimes in Syria, he really had no idea. The narrative that he had in his head was that the Syrian government, which was supported by most of the Syrian people, was being and it was being defended by Iran and Russia from an American-Israeli plot to get rid of the leader, which is just totally inaccurate in so many ways. There was a popular revolution in Syria 14 years ago, with millions of people on the streets from all social backgrounds, not just jihadis or whatever, but people from all different, leftists and secularists and liberals and nationalists and then different kinds of Islamists. And one or two jihadists who weren't very important at the beginning, but became more important as Assad, and then helped by Iran and Shia militias from all over the world, including Pakistan, and helped by imperialist Russian warplanes, the same planes that destroyed Afghanistan before the Americans arrived. They destroyed Syrian cities. There was a terrible war of 14 years to get rid of this regime, which had killed hundreds of thousands of Syrians and destroyed Syria's cities and had tortured hundreds of thousands of people to death in prisons. There was a war of the people. 90% of the people wanted to get rid of this regime, and eventually they managed. That's the backstory. So there's a huge amount of ignorance about Syria, which is a great shame.
I just want to clarify. I just want to correct you on one particular thing. Those were anti-imperial Russian bombers. They're anti-imperialist Russian bombers. See, they drop these special bombs. They don't explode. They implode. See.
Yeah.
The anti-imperialist, the operative term is anti. So whatever the imperialists do, the exact opposite has to be the anti-imperialist methodology. So all those people who died were, they were Takfiri Wahhabis at best, and at worst they were Uyghurs. They're all Uyghurs and Tatars who have come in, and it's all Central Asians and Circassians who are coming and fighting. It's not Syrians. It's these foreign people coming from the mountains somewhere.
It's not unlike what the Zionists say about the Palestinians.
The Egyptians, your Jordanians, your Lebanese.
All of those women and children that we're incinerating for their own good or starving to death, they're all extremist ISIS, Hamas terrorists.
They're
and
Hamas.
They're inherently anti-Semitic. And
they're all Hamas, they're all Hitler, and they're all Nazis. And if they're not that, they're not actually Palestinian, because there is no Palestine. They're all from Jordan. they're all from Egypt. They're Egyptians. All of them are Egyptians.
Exactly. It's the
Yeah, so
same.
it's the same kind of, so like they want to, in Pakistan, like you said, like this gentleman you mentioned, this career lawyer, well-read guy, I suspect. It's because the propaganda that they're consuming wants to have it both ways. That they're both ISIS and Al Qaeda and these religious nuts, and they're also somehow the CIA and the Mossad. But yeah, but they're also, and it was always the Jews, by the way. It's always been the Jews. Like, like it's just a weird, like, wrap your head around it. Like you don't get it, um,
and it's kind of racist. I mean, I've got used to white leftists doing it, not seeing their own racism when they dismiss a whole people and their struggle and their suffering. And they turn it into a cartoon, a set of cartoon characters and their own story about those funny brown people. I've got used to white leftists doing that and not being aware of their own inherited racism and the racism and Islamophobia that's so deep in the culture that even though they can see when it's being done to the Palestinians or to the Iraqis during the Iraq War, they can see that it's all propaganda, but they do it so easily themselves against another people. But it's very depressing when Muslims are doing it. It's very depressing when we ourselves, and I'm sure the Syrians have got blind spots about other Muslim peoples and struggles as well. We all have these blind spots. We're very ignorant about each other. And how can
Pakistan. We're the subcontinent. We're like the default punching bag for all the Muslims because we're the funniest to them, I guess. Pakistani, Bengali, Indian. We're the funniest Muslims to the rest of Islam. But if you think about it, like you mentioned, this is so fascinating. I had this exact conversation with my colleague Saad, the one that helped you come onto the show, and you graciously accepted. That one image of that Bedouin fighter, one particular gentleman with a white beard and buck teeth, was a rough looking Bedouin man. He lives in the desert. Maybe Allah has not blessed him with the most attractive of visage, and it was so dehumanizing that they called him a beard. He wasn't a person; he was a beard. And there's a particular look of a beard that they have in their mind that they display. It's a beard without a mustache, and it's a bit longer because the Salafi individuals, tend to keep a longer beard. And he has buck teeth, and he's like this image of an Arab Bedouin savage, which Muslims were making fun of.
Yeah, of course. I mean, within the
that guy was any sheep herder, any animal herder, any nomad from any Muslim nation. अस्सलाम वालेकुम। लोग बार बार एक सवाल पूछते हैं कि कौन सी बुक्स मैं शौक से पढ़ता हूँ, तो हमने ये सोचा कि इंशाल्लाह हम एक बुक क्लब बना लें जिसके अंदर माहवार हम एक किताब को कवर करें, और ये मंथली 4 क्लासेस बनेंगी इंशाल्लाह। इसके अंदर हम 12 किताबें एक साल के अंदर कवर करेंगे। एक लिस्ट है बुक्स की, मैं आपको यहाँ डिस्प्ले कर देता हूँ, और ये टेंटेटिव लिस्ट है। इसमें मैंने कुछ इकोनॉमिक्स की किताबें रखी है, कुछ पॉलिटिकल साइंस की, और कुछ थोड़ी जो नॉटी गवर्नमेंट्स की जो मिसगिविंग्स होती हैं और उनके ऊपर जो इन्वेस्टिगेटिव जर्नलिस्ट ने काम किया हुआ है। हमारी क्लासेस जो होंगी वो एंटरटेनिंग होंगी, फन होंगी, लेकिन सब्जेक्ट मैटर जो है सीरियस होगा। मैं रेकमेंड करूंगा कि आप फिजिकली ज्वाइन करें, लेकिन अगर आपको फिजिकली ज्वाइन करने में दिक्कत आती है, ना आप पाकिस्तान में नहीं है, आप लाहौर में नहीं है, तो उनके लिए फिर जूम की ऑप्शन अवेलेबल है और उनको इक्वली एज मच एक्सेस मिलेगा बुक क्लब का। इनकी हम एक सेपरेट व्हाट्सएप कम्युनिटी भी बना देंगे आपकी, ताकि हम वहां पे नोट्स भी शेयर कर पाएं और इन बुक्स को तफसील में डिस्कस करके होपफुली वी मेक फ्रेंड्स एज वेल इंशाल्लाह। तो इसकी फीस जो मुकर्रर है आप वेबसाइट पे देख सकते हैं, यहाँ पे आपको लिंक मिल जाएगा। तो आई होप टू सी यू देयर एट द बुक क्लब इंशाल्लाह। सी यू सून। He looked like somebody I know. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So the physiognomy of this person.
This reduction of complicated issues to some image that we can then use to describe a whole group, whether it's the Bedu or the Druz or the Salafis or the Muslims or the whoever they are, is it's a silly racist behavior and thought habit, and it doesn't help anybody to understand anything, and it just increases the stupid divisions between us all. Anyway, yeah. Let's go to that's the background, because I'm about to be very critical of the new authorities in Syria, but I'm aware the difficulty with that is I'm aware when I do that there is a whole group of people who, maybe not their own fault, maybe because of the media they consume, will immediately say silly things like, oh, well, maybe the Syrians would have been better off if they'd stayed with Assad. And no, it was like the profound problems in Syria, the fact that we don't have a real central government, but we have lots of different militias, the fact that we have hundreds of thousands of traumatized, angry men with guns of different types from different backgrounds, all of that is because of the Assad regime. That is because the Assad regime refused to reform, refused to listen to the people, but turned it into a terrible war. And when it lost that war, it brought in foreign powers to further traumatize the Syrians. It's because of the terrible, violent, sectarian dictatorship and totally corrupt that the country is now in ruins, and it's proving very difficult to put it back together. So my criticisms of the new authorities, which I will get into shortly, these criticisms are based on the assumption that this is the new authority. I want it to succeed. I want it to work. I want Syria's transition to be successful. I want all the different communities in Syria to be able to come together under one government reasonably happily. And I want the militias, all the different militias, to give up their weapons to the central state. So the new authorities are definitely making mistakes, which I'll talk about. But that does not mean that I think the old regime was better. The old regime was a million times worse.
But you're forgetting, as a Syrian in diaspora, you don't have any agency, because don't you know that the entire Arab Spring was all one big chessboard, and that Libya is the same as Syria, and Syria is the same as Iraq, and Iraq is the same as Misr, and that you're all the same you're all Arabs. So as an Arab, you don't know that you don't have agency. You see, because Syria was exactly like Libya. There's no difference between them. Bashar was just like Gaddafi. It was a manufactured thing. It was all mercenaries coming in from Dagestan and Chechnya and Uzbekistan. It's all these mountain men who are not real humans, by the way. So this complete lack of agency when it comes to the Syrian people that is purported in just all dialogue. That's off the bat. Oh, it's a coup. It was a CIA coup. Oh, it's a color revolution. Like the organic, unique circumstances within the Syrian people and with the Syrian regime of Bashar, those are never brought to the discussion. Like what we have now is because of Bashar. It's not because of Bashar leaving. He did this. People don't know that he patronized ISIS. He patronized extremist groups to cut away and to cut down the more organic, the more original, more multicultural representative Syrian movements, protests as well as violent movements. So what would you say to that? Like, is Syria a color revolution? Was this a color revolution? Is this some Zelensky-like character that we have on our hands, Mr. Shara?
I don't believe that it was absolutely not. I mean, some Syrians also believe this, but I don't subscribe to the idea that there's different versions of the idea that the Americans or the Israelis or the Turks or the Russians, or maybe all of them working together, decided to get rid of Bashar al-Assad and to bring in Ahmed al-Shara. I just don't think that's what happened. I think that what happened was that after 14 years of war, with the Assad regime hollowing out politically, socially, economically, and with the Russian defender of the Assad regime being weakened in Ukraine, and with the Hezbollah defender of the Assad regime being weakened by the Israelis, I think that finally it collapsed. I don't think that even Ahmed al-Shara expected to get to Damascus. I certainly don't think that Erdogan knew it was going to happen. I've been talking to people who've been telling me about the private discussions in Turkey, in the Turkish government, in November, December, and they were very much in two groups. There was the group that had been trying to normalize Assad, that thought that we don't want Ahmed al-Shara in power. And then there was another group saying, okay, but given that they're advancing, let's see what happens. And then when he won, everybody came round and thought, okay, this is the best deal we've got. And they're trying to tame him, I suppose. But I don't think that it was a color revolution at all. The people were against the Assad regime. The Assad regime gradually weakened, its pillars were removed. And then, when it collapsed, the strongest militia in the country inherited power.
You were in protest in Damascus recently, and you posted on your Facebook. You made a lengthy post about Assad style shabiha going through the crowds and trying to incite sectarian as well as ethnic sort of domination over the other within Syria, and almost inciting the people to engage in the violence and to engage in wanton violence. What do you think that is? Is that a core? Like, if you broke down the interest groups or the ethnic enclaves within Syria, what core of that of Syria is that? Is it that jihadi internationalist element which is there, it's undeniable, or is that a much more manufactured, much more sinister element of the new Syrian regime? Or is it just organic that within the people there are people who are aggressive to these ideas?
I mean, there's everything at once. It's the Waqf or the sit-in. I was at a sit-in where people were holding up signs which said "Damm Suri ala Suri haram." Yani the blood of it's haram. It's forbidden for a Syrian to spill Syrian blood, and they were calling for the problems in Sweden and elsewhere in Syria to be solved by dialogue rather than violence. And then, after a couple of hours or an hour and a half or something, a group of men, obviously organized, but I don't know who organized them. It was central Damascus. A group of men, all with the same kind of stick or baton, arrived and started beating people and insulting people. They smashed somebody's phone on the ground. And then they shouted, "Qaidna lilabad Sayyidina Muhammad," which, our leader forever is the Prophet Muhammad, which in the context came across as a kind of sectarian Islamist chant. And it was a very worrying sign because it wasn't like Assad Shabiha totally. In the old days, Assad Shabiha would have beaten people and then grabbed them and put them inside buses and taken them to prisons where they would have been tortured and perhaps tortured and starved to death eventually. So it's not yet like that, but there is a message on the street sent by who I don't know, but saying, you people don't do politics like that. Politics is the realm of the men of violence. It's not your business. It's the role of the men of violence. And that's not what Syrians had a revolution.
At the same time though, on the flip side, if I had to defend this sort of violent fervor, like even in the Facebook post, you mentioned that they were shouting that we only today we found one of our children cut up by the Druz militias into pieces. And then obviously you're incensed by the fact that the people at the sit-in aren't, for cutting up, Sunni or Arab children or whatever. But the argument here is that there is no dialogue in particular with the Sweda Druz, because those militia groups organized as fifth columnists. They're disingenuously acting as bad faith actors. How much? Because there is a truth to the fact that the Druz militias were being totally motivated and controlled with a large amount of impetus coming from Israel. You saw these incursions. You saw a lot of Israeli officials coming in even after doing victory parades, with flags and on buses and on APCs. So that element have they not sort of given up on the social contract of Syrian society, whatever that might be?
Well, there's various points there. I mean, firstly, I must say that the most controversial Druze leader is a guy called Al-Hajri, and
Hekmat al-Hijri, yeah.
Al-Hajri, Sheikh Al-Hajri, and there is a Hajri, and there is the Sweda Military Council, which is associated with him, which undoubtedly contains ex-Assadist officers. Some of them are the kind of people that would have committed crimes against the Syrian population during the revolutionary years. It probably also contains lots of Captagon mafia people. Captagon being an amphetamine type drug, which the old Syrian regime profited enormously from, and it had lots of client militias and mafias who would smuggle this drug to the Gulf, across the Jordanian border, which is close to Sweden, and so on. So, and there has definitely been shameful, treacherous collaboration between al-Hijri and Israel. And then that's resulted in Israeli bombing of the government forces in Sweden and of buildings right in central Damascus. I heard the explosion in one of them when I was there. That enraged people, which may have been the Zionist aim. I mean, it made the sectarian problem worse because it made people think that all Druz are in league with Israel. It made some people in Damascus think that, which is rubbish. And now I'll come on to another point here. It's wrong to imagine that the entire Druz community was with Sheikh Hajri, and that the entire Druz community supports Israel. That's just not the case. That's simply not the case. And it depends which Druz you talk to, how much, how popular they think al-Hajri used to be. I reckon that he had less than, he probably had 30% support, something like that, amongst the Druz. But he was when he was suspicious of the central government, right from the beginning, right from December the 8th, he has been suspicious of the Al-Shara government. And so have many of the Druz population. And if you think about it, they have good reason to be worried about the central government. It doesn't mean that I agree with them. It doesn't mean that I agree with them wanting to be separate from Syria, but let's accept that they have reason to be worried, as all minorities do in Syria. Hopefully their worries are not entirely well-founded, but some of them are because of what's happened. Anyway, they're worried because the new leaders, it's not politicians, it's a militia. The people in power are a militia. Ahmed al-Shara is the leader, or was until very recently, the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which used to be, a long time ago, an Al-Qaeda connected militia. It's definitely a Sunni Muslim militia. It didn't fight in the name of Syrian nationality. It certainly didn't fight in the name of secularism or minority rights or something like that. It fought in the name of the Sunni Muslims. So they are suspicious. And it's a community in the south of Syria, near the Jordanian border, on a mountain, the Jebel al-Arab or Jebel al-Druz, depending on who you talk to. They moved into that area several hundred years ago. They share the area with Bedouin tribes. And they are worried about the central government. They probably would have liked some level of autonomy. And the central government was doing a reasonably good job of playing off the different Druz militias and factions against each other and isolating al-Hijri. But then in July, they'd also been doing some bad things. They'd been trying to manipulate in a more unpleasant way. Like there was a checkpoint on the road from Damascus to Sweden, which was manned very aggressively by people who did express sectarian hatred sometimes, and who sometimes committed crimes against people on the road. So there were nasty ways of trying to deal with the people in Sweden, as well as more diplomatic ways trying to build up certain groups in Sweden and make them friends of the government and move them against al-Hijri. But then in July, what happened was a problem arose between the Druz and the Bedouin in Sweden, which may or may not have been directly influenced or manipulated by the central government in Damascus.
Is the vegetable?
The vegetable seller. It's when some Bedouin guys kidnapped a Druz Bedouin seller, and then some Druz militia guys or thugs went and kidnapped a whole load of Bedouin civilians. And then the two communities started taking hostages from each other, and so on. And it turned to violence. And then there was lots of complicated stages in the violence. But and there were lots of ceasefires, which were then broken first, usually by this Hejri guy, in part, surely because he's a bad actor and he doesn't want, he wants Syria to be splintered, and he's not really interested in proper negotiation with the central authorities, especially when he feels that he's got Israel at his back, bombing on his behalf. But also they were broken because of the abuses committed by government forces. When the government went in there, it didn't go in as a neutral national government establishing the peace between two communities, the Druz and the Bedouin. It basically went in there on the side of the Bedouin. And then over the course of days, as the ceasefires were broken and there was more violence, when government-affiliated forces did go in, they very often engaged in unforgivable sectarian crimes. And they burnt whole villages, and they massacred people for being Druz. And the worst video that I've seen is a video of, I mean, just in symbolic terms, is a video of government-affiliated thugs, although you can't really tell because 8 months after the liberation, it's not clear who is a government fighter and who isn't, because they're not all in one uniform. They're not all under one command. They're often filming themselves committing crimes. So they clearly haven't even been told once that you're not meant to commit crimes, because they don't know that they're not meant to broadcast their crimes to the world and put them on social media. So they clearly haven't in 8 months, even after the massacres on the coast in March, they haven't had one talking to in which they've been told you cannot deal with Syrian civilians in a barbaric manner. It doesn't matter who they are, what their sect is, what their politics are, what they look like, what clothes they're wearing. You are not allowed to deal with them in a barbaric manner. You are a servant of the state. They haven't been told that once. So the worst video that I saw was in Sweden. A guy is sitting there unarmed, and the person filming, who's also the person with the gun, says, Sunni wala Darzi, are you Sunni or are you Druz? And he says, brother, I'm a Syrian. And they say, what does that mean? Are you Sunni or Druz? And he says, I'm Druz, brother. And then they kill him. Now, the message there, not only is that a horrific crime, it's a crime. I mean, as a Sunni Muslim, it particularly offends me because it's supposedly done by one of my co-religionists in the name, supposedly, of my community. But what he's doing is creating a disaster for all Syrian communities, him and people like him. When other Syrians see that message, when the Alawites, who are at least 10% of the population in the northwest of the country, see the question, Sunni wala Darzi, Syrian, what does that mean? And then they have got the message, okay, this state will never accept us because we're not Sunnis. When the Kurds, who are Sunnis actually, but when the Kurds in the northeast, who happen to be Sunnis, but they define themselves differently. They define themselves as Kurdish Syrians first, politically, in political terms. I'm not talking about their spiritual life. And after that, some of them will be religious Sunnis, some of them won't be, but they're Sunnis. But when they see that, they think this state is for Sunni Arabs, it's for Islamists, it's not for us. They're never going to accept us because we don't speak Arabic. Therefore, we're going to keep our guns and we're going to fight. What has happened in Sweden after the government's mistakes this time is that the whole community has come together around this Hejri guy, or not around that guy. They don't care anymore about the politics of Hejri or Bal'ous or Hinawi. They don't care about the politics of the different guys.
So here, is it a case of incompetence or a lack of control over their men, or is it? Do you think there is a suspicion amongst netizens that that this is all planned and that Jolani's job or Ahmad Shara's job is to deliver these ethnic enclaves to the Israelis? There's the conspiracy theories are there. So it's one of three things: either that the central government is in on it, and they're trying to isolate other Syrians in hope either to dominate them or them to deliver them to Israel. Is it just incompetence? They don't know how to make policies, or is it a lack of control over the fighting force? Because the core of it has these sort of extremist Islamist ideas where they want to dominate the other ethnic or cultural minorities and other groups.
I mean, okay, so the question is, why are they making the mistakes? I don't believe they're making the mistakes in league with Israel, for example. Um, I I don't believe they want to help Israel in this. However, their mistakes may well end up helping Israel. So I don't think they're consciously working with the Zionists
Yeah,
or
the
the
Zionists,
Americans.
then the Zionists wouldn't be bombing Damascus then. We're not playing 7D chess. We're just playing 4D chess. Right.
Exactly. But the question is, and I'm trying to find the answer to it, but I because some people who I respect, like for example, there's a researcher, he's an American, I think, but I really respect the research work he does. He's called Gregory Waters. You can follow him online, Gregory Waters, and he he spends a lot of time in Syria. He clearly speaks excellent Arabic, and he spends a lot of time interviewing all kinds of people, especially in the northwest of the country. You know, Alawites, Ismailis, Christians, Sunnis of different backgrounds in the northwest of the country. And I trust him, and I'm going to have a conversation with him soon about this, I hope, but see in more detail what he thinks. But he believes, like someone I spoke to recently, who I won't say who's kind of part of the government or very close to the government. They are telling me that this is a problem of factionalism. They want to get on top of it. The people in control of the situation, you know, Ahmed Al-Shara and his top officials, they want to get on top of it. They don't want this to happen, but they're finding it really difficult. Apparently, according to Gregory Waters, more people are being punished, more fighters are being punished for abuses than we, the public, see. And my response to that is, but the public need to see it. The Alawites and the Druz and the Sunnis need to see that criminals are being punished, and therefore there will be more trust in the state.
Is it a case of maintaining balance of fighter trust and public trust?
Gregory Waters says, and what other people are telling me, is that whenever they do punish anybody, there is a huge amount of pushback from the militias, from the communities in which the militias operate. And yeah, it's not as simple as saying these guys are all, whatever the term is, Wahhabis or Salafi jihadis or extreme.
I should say it in the accent. Takfiri Wahhabi, brother. They are all Takfiri Wahhabi. They are not a human.
It's not to do with a level of piety. And it's not even necessarily to do with a religious political affiliation.
This is a case of factionalism.
It's factionalism, and it's also to do with the deep-rooted anger.
But I completely accept why the factions are like this, why their psyche is so violent and paranoid, and the in-group biases in Syria. I get it. It's been built for 50-60 years by a faction-based Alawi regime. It's been ingrained into Syrian society. It's in fact denatured the Sham for what it is, to a large extent, for being one of the most cosmopolitan and oldest, cultural hubs of human history, 4,000-5,000 years. But at the same time, I saw an interview recently of some American nun, I think from the Greek Orthodox Church. She was on the Tucker Carlson show because the Americans are also doing a cultural about face on Israel, and she was critiquing her time that she spent in the Sham. She's been in Lebanon and in Palestine, in Syria, whatever. It was obviously the focus was on Palestine, but she raised a very fascinating point. She was quoting the patriarch of Antioch and about this bombing of a church, which he was the patron, I guess, of, and she said that he had some very harsh words for the regime, right? At that time, there was a slow response from the new government, to show sympathy with and to give statements about the Christian bombing that I think was done by ISIS or one faction. What do you think is the slow response? What is that motivation? It's not to annoy the Sunni base. What is it?
I think so. let me, after I've answered this, let me quickly go back to Sweden, because I didn't talk about the more negative interpretation of what the government is doing, that actually maybe they are trying to, they are guilty. But I'll come back to that. About the church, I think that I certainly don't think that they wanted the church bombing. I think that their attitude to Christians and so on, I think they understand that they'd get into a lot of trouble with America and Europe if they openly attack Christians. They don't want to do that, and I don't think they've got much of a problem with Christians, because Christians, unlike the Druz, who are a majority in a specific part of Syria and therefore have a lot of political power, and unlike the Alawites, who are also like maybe not a majority, but they're a big in the Latakia and Tartus countryside, they are a majority and they have potential political power. But the Christians are not concentrated in any one area, and they don't represent a political threat. So I'm sure that the church bombing actually was a kind of, it was claimed by a group called Saraya and Sarasinna, and I don't know if nobody really knows who they are. Are they an ISIS front? Are they ex-Hayat Tahrir al-Sham people who have broken away because they don't like Ahmed al-Shara being moderate? Who are they? Is it even, it could be, some kind of other interests behind it. It's very shadowy. It's very shadowy.
Intelligence operations.
It could be. I mean, at some level. I mean, obviously, it was a suicide bombing, so they've got to find one local idiot who thinks he's doing it for a cause. But it could well be manipulated by intelligence operations. I just don't know. But the fact that Ahmed al-Shara didn't feel he was able to go and visit the church is a bit worrying. But I think it does. I think it shows that there are a lot of radicalized, traumatized, angry men who thought that they were fighting for maximalist Sunni aims, and they have guys that maybe grew up in a refugee camp and did not participate in the multicultural society of Syria that people who grew up in city centres did participate in. Those people exist, and they're angry and so on, and so part of it is trying to balance them. But what's more worrying, let me go back to Sweden quickly. Because the more charitable interpretation is that, okay, the people in charge do want to get in control of the militias. They do want to stop the sectarianism and the violence. It's just difficult for them to do, and it's taking them a long time, and they have to make sure that they don't get taken out or by the angry militant fringe of their organization, or they don't want to anger mobilized sections of traumatized Sunni society. But the other response to that is, look, in March, when there was sectarian killing of Alawites on the coast, when in March the government made the mistake, when Falul Nizam, when the remnants of the old regime launched an insurgency and killed some security men and killed some civilians too, the government then made a mistake. It then kind of announced, called for jihad, and it called for everybody to mobilize and go to the coast and so on. And they may have done that because they didn't have a huge confidence in their ability to hold things together. It was still very early days. But what happened was these guys went there. Some of them put down the insurgency, great. But after the insurgency had been put down, they then murdered men, women, and children. They killed Alawites and looted from their homes. And they were asking people the question, Sunni wala Alawi, are you Sunni or Alawite? And they killed people, including the family of Hanadi Zahlut, who is a revolutionary. She was an anti-Assad figure. She was an Alawite, and her family were all killed. So this was a terrible disaster, and that happened in March. Now in July, once again, the government has mobilized one community, the Bedouin, against another community, the Druz. It's made the same mistake again. In July, months after the disasters in March, the same militias that were accused of committing crimes on the coast in March were sent to Sweden. And they committed crimes there. You know, we saw the same kind of behavior months later, as if no lessons have been learned. I mean, at very least, no lessons have been learned. It's perhaps more logical to say that these people in power are militiamen. They're very intelligent militiamen. In November and December, they showed that they were capable of being much more intelligent than one would have expected. They were capable of appealing to different communities in Syria in an intelligent way. But now that they're in power, it looks less like that. It looks like they are ready at the slightest hesitation to use the tactic of mobilizing one section of Syrian society against another section of Syrian society. And my point is that whatever the provocation, however horrible Sheikh al-Hajri is, however awful it is to see some Druz collaborating with Israel, there is no excuse for this kind of behavior, which makes it impossible to build a nation. You cannot build a nation by setting one community against another community and by using violence. You have to use diplomacy. You can go in and arrest Sheikh Hajri at the right moment and try him, and if he's found guilty of treason, you can even execute him for all I care. But you cannot go in and burn people's homes and murder people for being Druz if you then expect that community to ever want to be part of the new Syria. It's a disaster what's happened. And the fact that it's happened months after the disaster in March, it means now that all three communities on the periphery of Syria, the Alawites, the Druz, and the Kurds, who together make up more than 20%, maybe 25% of the population, that's enough to, scared 25% of the population is by far enough to stop a country functioning, to stop it rebuilding, and to lay the way open.
Then shouldn't it be a case of shouldn't it be a case of fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me? Like if they're repeating the same mistake over and over again, like you articulated, these are young men raised in refugee camps. They have no idea of the cosmopolitan, multicultural Syria, and they have these Sunni maximalist positions and ideas which they fought for. Is there no public dialogue about rehabilitation and trying to re-educate these fighters and rehabilitate them into government jobs and formal positions?
The problem is that they are, that's what should have been happening for months. And that's what, the authorities go through the motions. They say that they are trying to rehabilitate these people and so on, but it's clear that they're actually not. I just don't know what to think, because on the one hand, as I said, Gregory Waters tells me he's been monitoring the web pages, the Facebook pages and so on, associated with various militias which are now supposedly subsumed into the Ministry of Interior or the Ministry of Defense. And he is noticing on those that people are saying, yes, this guy has been punished for committing a crime. This other guy has been punished for committing a sectarian murder. And they're angry about it and upset about it. But it's not happening. I don't know. I can't reconcile that knowledge with what I've seen.
So what Gregory is describing is a PR problem, where they have to maintain a balance between not disappointing the soldiers or publicly embarrassing the fighters and satisfying the public. But it seems like your concern is that it's much deeper than just a PR problem, that there's a real deep-rooted sort of cynicism in the government where they're like, yeah, we're multicultural Syria, but we're just Sunni Arabs, you know what I mean? Like, do you think that cynicism, like you mentioned, going through the motions of rehabilitating and mending the bridges between different factions of Syrian society, can we address that cynicism in the heart of the government then?
I mean, it's not just cynicism, and I don't think. I mean, as I say, I was talking to somebody connected to the government, and I think that that person certainly, believes that they're doing the right thing, and is not cynical. And I think there's a lot of people associated with the government that have that feeling. My worry is about the very core of the government, the security core, the HTS people in the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of the Interior, and Ahmed Al-Shara. It seems to me that the only logical conclusion after Sweda is that they have which is to be expected, that they have the mentality of militiamen, because they are militiamen. They're very successful militiamen. And my problem is that I don't think that you can make entire communities submit in the way that you can make militias submit. When you are trying to get stronger than the rival militias in Idlib in 2015, 2016, 2017, and 18, then you do that using a certain amount of intimidation, co-opting, diplomacy, military action, thuggery. You can't do that with whole communities. You just can't. The Shia majority in or the political parties, especially the Iran-backed political parties, which inherited power after Saddam Hussein in Iraq, they blamed the whole Iraqi Sunni minority for the crimes of Saddam Hussein, and they repressed them, and they thought they could make them submit, and it didn't work. What happened in the end was that ISIS got a foothold, and the whole country collapsed again into war. It just doesn't work. Have the Zionists been able to make the Palestinians in Gaza submit? Of course not. And the Syrian government doesn't have the ability to commit that kind of destruction in Sweden or anywhere else. So I believe they think that they can deal with building a Syrian nation by behaving like militiamen, and we need them to be much more transparent. We need them to bring many more civilians into the heart of key security decision making. And I would like to quickly talk about something called Al-Mubadara Al-Miyawiyya As-Suriya, which I've seen recently. There's a Facebook page. If you go to my blog, which is qunfuz.com, Qunfuz, I've kind of posted a summary in English of what it says in Arabic, and there's a link to its Facebook page. This is a declaration signed, it's a set of suggestions signed by a couple of hundred Syrian oppositionists, revolutionary figures, civil society figures, and they're not calling for the fall of the Ahmed Al-Shara administration, because that would be ridiculous. We all know that there's no alternative to the Ahmed Al-Shara administration. There isn't an alternative at the moment at all, and other than chaos, which nobody wants. We want them to succeed, but what we want them to do is allow many more people from civil society into the heart of decision making, make it much more transparent, and allow diplomacy. We don't want just a Sunni militia being seen as being in charge. We want a national government which can work with all the minority groups by diplomacy to isolate the bad actors like Sheikh al-Hijri and the remnants of the old regime, to isolate those people and to show the Kurds and the Alawites and the Druz in particular at the moment that they don't need to be scared of the central state, that they can give up their weapons. The decisions that are being made at the moment just set that cause back. As I say, once again, now that Druz see people being asked the question, are you Sunni or Druz, and then being killed if the answer is wrong, they feel that there is nothing that they can do now which will cooperate with the central state. And that's a disaster for the future.
Robbin, you've been very helpful. I've had a full meal while you've patiently off camera. Obviously, they'll cut out my bits. But
I wish I had.
I wish I could share this. It was a really, really nice chickpea dal situation. It was spicy.
It made me more hungry. Yeah.
I'm still reeling from it. It's very spicy. I had a late lunch because I skipped lunch because I was doing some other work. But I just want to add some levity, so I just started eating. Yeah, I mean, we can just hope and pray for this, but I seriously see a big crisis. If you compare, Afghan society is less educated, less cosmopolitan. All the ethnic groups live in enclaves. There's less mixing. Tajiks live there, the Uzbeks live over there, the Pashtuns live over there, and so on. The Pashtuns have an overwhelming majority, and the closest thing I can get to HTS's success is the Taliban success, coming out of the buffer areas of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and then retaking their country after America exited because of whatever political reasons. There was a legacy of violence behind the Taliban that sort of, it was a scared state story. You know, everybody knew what they were like back in the day. So they were like, maybe we shouldn't. And it was a 20-year legacy also of the American war. So they knew how brutal the Taliban could be and how good they could be. Yani they knew they had the full spectrum. This is very cynical. But do you think there is a thinking in the Syrian management that we need to, instill the fear of God in these people, and then we can work our ways, work ourselves into becoming the nice guys, the politicians, and the posturing is there, with the suits and the track suits and his wife and the way they act. It's a very good diplomatic show for the people that this is a new kind of Syria, and that it's a meeting of the old and the new. It's a religion, it's our culture, it's Arabs, it's all of these communities. But at the same time, do you think at its core there is a cynicism of like, there needs to be some blood, people need to be scared somewhat of us? There is that sort of latent desire.
Yes, yes, yes. I do think so. I think that, again, as I say, I think the people in charge are very successful, very intelligent militiamen. They're militiamen. So, of course, they think in terms of putting the fear of God in people. And also, I spoke to many people in Syrian society. I had lots of conversations when I was there this time. And there are lots of ordinary people who have that attitude, particularly about the Alawites, it's a bit, the Alawites, a lot of Alawites did support the Assad regime because Assad was one of their community. And a lot of Alawites got jobs in the military and the security services through that. A lot of them didn't, but a lot of them supported the Assad regime. And some of them are still in denial about the extent of the enormous sadistic crimes that Assad committed against Syrians. So there are a lot of people who, but still, it's wrong to say it was an Alawite regime. There were Sunnis in the regime and Sunnis who profited from it, and there were Alawites who were tortured to death, so by the regime. So, but there are a lot of people who think, yes, some blood. I mean, somebody said that to me, literally. I asked him about what happened in Latakia.
Some blood must be shed.
And he said, it's a bad thing, it's a sad thing, but to be honest, some blood had to flow, some blood had to be shed for them to understand that things have changed. So that exists amongst the militiamen, and it exists in wider society.
That's the human condition. That's the human condition.
It's the human condition. I just think it's wrong. I think that we have to try to end the cycle, however difficult that is, because I want security for all Syrians, including Sunnis. If the Alawites don't feel safe, they will be setting off car bombs and killing ordinary people, whatever their background.
Yes. A deeper question. With the complete collapse of liberal democracy across the region and the world, don't you think they have a bit of a free pass now? A lot of military-style juntas and dictatorships, like the one in Pakistan. In Pakistan, it's pretty open now. We're like, yeah, this democracy business is kind of done. We're gonna be a hard state. We're gonna be this hybridized whatever regime. Everywhere in the world, you see that regimes are doubling down. Liberal democracy is taking a back foot. You have President Trump declaring practically martial law in Washington. They're picking up the homeless and putting them in jail or whatever. Where you see this kind of centralized militiamen controlling the world, not just particular countries anymore. It's just, you're hard pressed to find a reason why you have to explain to these men in Syria who have just liberated their country, you should do it differently. You should really try to do it differently. We're doing it all over the planet like this, but maybe you guys should give representative democracy a chance, or some kind of multicultural liberal society a chance. They're like, no, we don't need to do this anymore. And on their neighborhood, there is Israel, the ethnic of all ultimate ethnic enclaves. The ultimate is like peak apartheid. Rhodesia doesn't have anything on it. South Africa doesn't have anything on it, and it's working. It doesn't get condemned internationally. No trade is cut off to it. No weapons are cut off to it. The precedent that has been set doesn't motivate the Syrian regime to do anything about their problems. As long as they can maintain the literal integrity of the borders, they're like, yeah, I mean, the Alawis or the Druz or even Sunnis are numbers on a screen. How do we, what will motivate the Syrian people to create, because you're not asking them to become a communist or a capitalist, you're asking them to come up with something from scratch. What motivation do people have when, I've seen your cafes, I've seen how you buy sandwiches with the big wad of a billion Syrian dinars or whatever. I've seen that. That's hilarious to me. What conversation about economics and political theory will those people be having? That's my problem. Like, why do we expect them to do any different? Is also a question that I ask myself all the time.
Well, I mean, why do we expect to do different? Because we expect to do better. We want to improve our situation. I completely agree with you about your survey of the situation of the world. Of course, there's no liberal democratic model being followed or working anywhere. The values of the liberal age, to the extent that it ever existed, is out the window. I mean, the Gaza genocide is the main nail in the coffin of that. The idea that if it was the Western powers, and there was something in it, there seemed to be something in this idea for a few decades, that despite all of their crimes, the West was also working on human rights and universalism.
That even survived the war on terror somehow, by the way, which is insane to me. Because you've been in Pakistan. You were here during the war on terror, right? You came to Pakistan during that era.
Yes, indeed. No, I came before the war on terror. I'm even older than that. It depends. My first time in Pakistan was in 1996, I think.
Pakistan was a small slice of heaven back in the day. It was cozy. We just liberalized,
I worked for the news.
The news. The gold standard for English news reporting. The news. Well, we see you in Syria, but we need you back in Islamabad and in Lahore and in Karachi and Peshawar. You need to see it with fresh eyes, and it's always an honor to host the people of the Sham. We have the Palestinians here, not in the numbers that I'd like or anyone would be happy with. We don't have a lot of Syrians here. You guys need medical, training. You guys need engineering. You guys need computer science. We have those resources. The Pakistani government is negligent of the Syrian diplomatic front because of Turkey, because of Saudi, because those are our go-to states in that region. And I think there's a purposeful negligence because of the iffiness of the Israel situation and the Palestine situation. However, I think historically, the fact that Saif al-Azam flew his planes from Damascus to take down Israeli jets is a historic memory that shouldn't be left over to Bashar and his father. It should be owned by the Syrian people and the Pakistani people. A people-to-people connect. We need your help, Robbin. We don't know the Syrians. There is one really good fast food chain. I think it's run by a family of Syrians. It's called Wafir. They have good lamb, very good beef. It's the top Levantine Arab cuisine. Even though I hate the Levant term, but it's very good. The falafel is good. The rice and chicken, the rice and lamb, very good. But beyond that, as just Arab food, there's no connect with the Syrian people, with Syria. And we need to work on it, and we need to work on a physical exchange of human resources as well. And we
I
hope
hope
that
there's more and more of that, and in the whole world and the Muslim world, that people, as we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, people rely on stereotypes and racist assumptions and assumptions created by foreign imperialists we rely on in order to understand each other or misunderstand each other. And that's a great shame. And there's so much injustice, when, as you suggested, when Pakistanis, for example, work in the Gulf, they get treated like eighth-class citizens and a different race, a different species.
I think we kind of deserve it. No.
I left Syria via Lebanon, and the treatment of the Syrians at the Lebanese borders is appalling. So we have so many deep-rooted spiritual, cultural problems to overcome,
to address. No, with the Pakistanis, I'll say this. There's a saying in Urdu, "Laton ke bhoot baaton se nahi mante," which means the jinns and shayateens of kicks don't listen to words. So with us, maybe you need to shove us around a bit. We're bothersome people. I'm kidding, but when it comes to the Sham, there is a positive stereotype that I would like to reinforce, that the Sham, including Syria and Lebanon and Palestine, is the land of the Abdal. And if in Sunni tradition we hold any weight by that, this is a blessed land. This is the land of the prophets. This is the land of Antioch and Jericho and the Damascus, the literal road to Damascus. This is a sacred land. The Sham, all of it, and with Syria at the heart of it and Palestine at the heart of it. So that's a positive stereotype that I would like to see reinforced in the cultural zeitgeist in Pakistan, in their religious thinking. The Sham is not a part of it. It's just the Hijaz. So the Sham is as dear to us as the Hijaz and the Yemen. This is our religion. The people are shy about this, but this is our religion. And I suspect the veil of Arabic keeps us separate from everybody else. The Persian, the Mawara Nahar land, we're sort of separated from you guys. But the hearts beat as one. And I think that 7th of October and the subsequent, years have exposed a lot of harsh realities to us that we need to reconcile with.
Yes, indeed.
Robbin, Yassin, you're always a real sport, especially if I whip out a full meal. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to share the next meal with you, inshallah.
Inshallah, ya Rab, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.